Commander Sath Vex stood motionless before the Galactic Union Council, 7 feet of scaled muscle and natural armor gleaming under the Grand Chamber's crystalline lights. His posture communicated more than words ever could. Spine perfectly straight, shoulders squared, taloned hands clasped behind his back in the formal rest position of a Vexari warrior. The emerald scales along his neck rippled slightly with controlled breathing, the only outward sign of his awareness of this moment's historical significance. The council chamber had been designed to accommodate all member species of the Union. Soaring ceilings for the avian crest singers, aquatic environments along the perimeter for the amphibious Mirai delegates, and atmospherically controlled hoverpods for species that breathe gases toxic to the majority. Yet despite this diversity, none compared to the physical presence of the Vexari. The Defense Corps welcomes its new leadership, announced first speaker Thelion, a willowy being whose species had evolved in the gentle embrace of low gravity and perpetual spring weather. The speaker's voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of projecting authority in the presence of beings so fundamentally different from themselves. The Vexari's proven resilience makes them uniquely qualified to safeguard our civilization. Sath Vex permitted himself the rare display of emotion, a slow, deliberate blink of his tertiary eyelids that his kind recognized as pride. His people had earned this honor through blood and unwavering courage, confronting threats that would have annihilated the softer species of the Union. Around him, the other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, a mixture of relief and unease evident in their varied physiologies. They needed the Vexari, needed their natural armor, their combat instincts, their ability to survive conditions that would kill most sentient beings in minutes, but they also feared them, as prey inevitably fears predator, regardless of treaties and alliances. Commander Sath Vex, continued the speaker, in recognition of your species' unique contributions to Union security, we hereby grant the Vexari full authority over all military operations within Union space. Your kind alone possesses the biological adaptations necessary to face the harshest environments and most dangerous adversaries. Karis Vex, his first officer and clutch sister, stood 3 paces behind him, her own satisfaction evident only to those who knew how to read the subtle positioning of a Vexari's sensory spines. Their people had long claimed to be the only true deathworlders in known space, evolved on a planet so hostile that merely surviving to adulthood was considered an achievement among softer species. Vex Prime, their homeworld, boasted 1.3 times standard gravity, atmospheric toxins that would dissolve the lungs of unprotected visitors, and apex predators that made even the Vexari sleep in environmentally sealed chambers. Every Vexari bore the scars of their world with pride, each mark a testament to their superiority in a galaxy of beings who had evolved in comparative paradise. The ceremony shattered when emergency lights pulsed across the chamber ceiling, bathing the assembled delegates in alternating crimson and amber. The speaker's aide rushed forward with a data crystal clutched in trembling appendages, voice quavering with barely contained panic. Unknown vessel detected at Union border, the aide gasped, interfacing the crystal with the central projection system. It's using technology we've never seen before, and it emerged from the Forbidden Zone. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing sensor readings and preliminary scans. The council chamber erupted in overlapping vocalizations of alarm, all except for Commander Sath Vex, who felt only the hunter's instinctive thrill at the prospect of worthy prey. Silence, he commanded, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. Show me the vessel's trajectory. As the projection adjusted to highlight the ship's course, Sath Vex exchanged a meaningful glance with Karis Vex. Whatever this new entity was, it had survived passage through space, deemed too hazardous for even Vexari exploration vessels. That alone made it worthy of their personal attention. The Vexari flagship Invincible Claw sliced through the darkness of space, its crystalline propulsion system leaving a controlled trail of azure energy. On the command deck, Commander Sath Vex stood with his talons resting lightly on the navigation console, surrounded by the elite of his species, warriors who had proven themselves in the crucible of combat and exploration. "Magnify," he ordered as the mysterious vessel appeared on the main viewer. His vertical pupils contracted to thin slits, focusing with predatory intensity on the image before him. The alien craft defied conventional shipbuilding logic. Unlike the sleek, unified design of Vexari vessels or the ornate biological architecture favored by the artistic Mirai, this ship appeared to be a patchwork construction. Different sections showed evidence of repairs and modifications, with components that seemed technologically incompatible somehow functioning as a cohesive whole. Sensors indicate minimal defensive capabilities, reported technology specialist Maris Vex, her claws dancing across holographic interfaces. Yet it traversed radiation fields that would disable our own shielding. The propulsion signature suggests precise navigation through the Severin Nebula's gravity wells. First Officer Karis Vex tilted her head in the Vexari gesture of confusion. A vessel that fragile should have been torn apart. The occupants should be dead from radiation exposure alone. Sath Vex felt his hunting instincts sharpen. Perhaps they are already dead. Prepare boarding protocols. Before the order could be executed, the communication system chimed. "Commander, the vessel is broadcasting on multiple frequencies. They're attempting to establish contact using various language patterns." "Let them speak," Sath Vex commanded. The main viewer shifted to display the bridge of the alien vessel. The being who appeared on screen sent a ripple of surprise through the Vexari command crew. Small, soft-skinned, with no visible natural defenses, the alien appeared almost laughably vulnerable. "Greetings," said the creature in surprisingly clear Union Standard. "I am Captain Elena Reyes of the independent vessel Horizon Seeker, representing Earth. We come seeking peaceful contact and the possibility of trade relations." Sath Vex studied the alien captain carefully. No protective exoskeleton. No visible predatory adaptations. How had such a physically unimpressive species survived long enough to develop space travel, let alone navigate the Forbidden Zone? "This is Commander Sath Vex of the Galactic Union Defense Corps. Your presence in this sector is unexpected. We will rendezvous at Neutral Station Delta 9 for formal contact protocols." 3 cycles later, Sath Vex led his diplomatic contingent through Delta 9's main docking bay, towering over the station's security personnel in his ceremonial armor. The station operated at Union Standard gravity minus 1.2 times Earth normal according to their preliminary scans, which should have made movement difficult for the humans. Yet when the airlock cycled open, Captain Rice and her delegation moved with easy confidence, showing no signs of strain. More curious still, they wore no environmental protection, despite the higher oxygen content that should have been intoxicating to their systems. "Commander," Rice extended a hand in what their cultural briefing identified as a greeting gesture. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Before Sath Vex could respond, a violent tremor rocked the station. Warning sirens blared as structural integrity fields fluctuated. A support beam dislodged from the ceiling, plummeting toward diplomat Maris Vex, who stood analyzing environmental readings. Sath Vex lunged forward, but distance and position made his effort futile. To his astonishment, Captain Rice, barely 2/3 his height and a fraction of his mass, moved with startling speed. She crossed the space in a blur of motion, shoving the much heavier Vexari diplomat clear and narrowly avoiding being crushed herself. As emergency systems stabilized the station, Sath Vex reassessed the human with newfound interest. "You saved diplomat Maris Vex," he acknowledged later during the formal introduction ceremony. "Why risk yourself for an unknown alien?" Rice performed a gesture, shoulders momentarily rising and falling, that wasn't in their briefing materials. "Instinct, I guess. Where I come from, we don't let people get hurt if we can help it." Her casual dismissal of actions that contradicted every survival instinct known to the Vexari confused Sath Vex more than the act itself. These humans were a puzzle that defied easy categorization. Physically underwhelming, yet somehow surviving conditions that should have killed them. And now, inexplicably, willing to risk their fragile lives for strangers. The diplomatic vessel Sunward Crest approached the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star, its shields straining against radiation belts that would have been classified as hazardous in any Union safety protocol. Commander Sath Vex observed the planet growing larger on the view screen, its swirling blue-white surface deceptively serene. Shield capacity at 70%, reported Navigation Officer Trenvex, concern evident in her tightly angled sensory spines. These radiation levels exceed recommended exposure limits for even Vexari biology. Dr. Amir Hassan, the human guide assigned to their delegation, glanced up from his data tablet with mild surprise. The Van Allen belts. We can adjust our approach vector if they're causing problems for your systems. His casual tone suggested this intense radiation was a minor inconvenience rather than a lethal barrier. Sath Vex studied the human scientist carefully. No visible distress. No protective gear beyond standard clothing. Impossible. Your species lives with this radiation constantly, he inquired, keeping his voice neutral despite his disbelief. Well, not directly, Hassan explained, pointing to atmospheric readings. Our magnetosphere and atmosphere filter most of it. The belts themselves are just Earth's natural defense system, keeps the worst of the solar radiation from reaching the surface. As they descended through cloud layers, the true nature of Earth revealed itself in stunning chaotic glory. The Sunward Crest's journey took them over vast oceans churning with powerful currents, mountain ranges thrust violently from tectonic collisions, sprawling deserts, and frost-covered poles, all within a single planetary rotation. Your world experiences all these climate extremes simultaneously, asked xenobiologist Trenvex, frantically recording readings. The temperature differential between your polar and equatorial regions exceeds 40 standard units. Hassan nodded absently, focused on coordinating their landing approach. That's actually quite moderate right now. During seasonal shifts, the difference can be much more dramatic. The delegation landed at a facility called the International Diplomatic Center in a region humans called North America. As the Vexari emerged from their ship, environmental sensors embedded in their ceremonial armor immediately flashed warnings. Atmospheric pressure variations, pollen particulates, bacterial presence levels that would trigger quarantine protocols on any Union world. Yet humans moved through this biological soup without protection, breathing deeply of air teeming with microscopic life. That evening at the formal reception, the humans proudly served what they called their cultural cuisines, a diplomatic gesture meant to showcase Earth's diversity. Unaware that these foods contained compounds toxic to most galactic species, they watched with horror as junior diplomat Harris Vex sampled a tiny portion of a sauce called mild salsa and immediately collapsed, internal membranes seizing. While Union medics rushed to neutralize the capsaicin compound attacking the diplomat's nervous system, Dr. Hassan apologized profusely. We should have done more compatibility testing. That was just jalapeno, not even habanero or ghost pepper. Later analysis revealed humans regularly consumed substances that would qualify as military-grade chemical weapons by Union standards. They cultivated these plants intentionally, for enjoyment. During the second day of their visit, the delegation toured a wildlife preserve, where Commander Sath Vex witnessed creatures that defied evolutionary logic. Predators with speed and strength comparable to Vexari warriors, venomous arachnids whose toxins could drop a Union security team in seconds, and parasitic organisms specifically evolved to invade and consume living tissue. Most disturbing were the historical records showing that humans had evolved alongside these threats and occasionally hunted the apex predators with primitive weapons for sport. Your world should be classified as a death world by any reasonable standard, Sath Vex finally stated as they watched footage of something called mosquitoes, tiny flying parasites that had killed more humans throughout history than all wars combined. Captain Reyes, who had joined the tour, regarded him with a curious expression. Is that an official designation? It is, Vex Prime is the only other confirmed death world that has produced a spacefaring civilization. The environmental pressures required to evolve the necessary survival traits are extremely rare. Interesting, she replied, watching the documentary with new interest. We just call it home. How do you survive here? Sath Vex asked, genuine puzzlement breaking through his diplomatic reserve. She smiled, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as indicating neither aggression nor submission, but something uniquely human. We adapt, she said simply. It's what we do best. The Galactic Union Security Council chamber fell silent as the holographic displays cycled through comparative physiological scans. Vexary biology, long considered the pinnacle of evolutionary adaptation to extreme environments, projected alongside human baseline metrics. The evidence could not be ignored, despite its seeming impossibility. Their musculature density is approximately 60% of Vexari standard, explained medical director Jiv Lauren, a gelatinous being whose translucent form shifted through shades of blue as they spoke. Yet pound for pound, their endurance exceeds our greatest warriors. Their bones, while containing fewer mineral compounds than ours, demonstrate remarkable flexibility under stress rather than shattering. The director's form darkened with concern. Most disturbing is their immune response, where most species evolve symbiotic relationships with their microbial environment. Human immune systems aggressively attack foreign organisms. They are constantly at war within their own bodies. High Counselor Mriz Eril, eldest of the Vexari delegation, leaned forward. Are they a threat? The medical director's surface rippled in their species equivalent of uncertainty. Biologically, perhaps not directly. But their psychological profiles, the director's skin darkened further. They show decision-making patterns we cannot predict. Where Vexari minds follow logical progressions based on hierarchical values, human cognition appears to incorporate emotional variables in ways our models cannot anticipate. Commander Sath Vex stood before the council, conflicted between his duty to protect the Union and his growing respect for humans. In the weeks since first contact, he had studied their history extensively, finding himself both disturbed and impressed by their tenacity. The humans lack our natural weapons and armor, he acknowledged, yet they'd survived conditions comparable to Vex Prime through technological innovation and behavioral adaptation. Their unpredictability makes them potentially dangerous, but also potentially valuable allies. From the observation gallery, Captain Rice and her diplomatic team watched the proceedings through a one-way transparency field, translation devices relaying the discussion. Her expression remained neutral, but the subtle tension in her posture betrayed her awareness of what this assessment meant for Earth's future. Security Counselor Faraz Kar, a veteran of border conflicts with non-Union aggressors, raised a heavily scared hand. We should implement containment protocols immediately. Their technological development curve is exponential compared to Union standards. If they are allowed unrestricted movement through Union space, we cannot predict the consequences. The suggestion sent murmurs through the council chamber. Containment had only been implemented 3 times in Union history, each instance eventually leading to military action against species deemed too dangerous for diplomatic relations. Rhea's face hardened as the translation came through. She activated the communication panel, requesting formal speaking rights before the council, a bold move for a representative of a non-member species. The chamber fell silent as she took the central platform, her small stature dwarfed by the massive chamber designed for beings twice her size or larger. Honored representatives, she began, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her stance. I understand your concerns. Earth has never known the peace your worlds take for granted. We fought nature, predators, disease, and tragically, each other. Those struggles shaped us into what we are. She paused, gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. But those same struggles gave us art that can move even alien hearts, medicine that cheats death daily, and the determination to reach stars that our ancestors could only wonder about. Her eyes found Sath Vex's. If you fear us for our capacity for violence, you should fear us more for our dreams. They've always been bigger and more stubborn than any challenge we faced. The council members shifted uncomfortably, not at her words, but at the moisture tracking down her face, a physiological response completely alien to most of them. This paradoxical being, capable of both calculated violence and profound empathy, defied their understanding of sentient development. High Counselor Mriz Errol leaned toward Sathvex. What is happening to her facial membranes? Is this a threat display? No, Sathvex replied quietly, recalling information from the xenobiology briefing. They call it crying. It can indicate damage, but also emotional states. Grief, joy, anger, sometimes all simultaneously. The High Counselor's sensory spines flattened in confusion. How can a species survive with such contradictions? Before Sathvex could respond, emergency lights pulsed through the chamber, casting everyone in rhythmic crimson illumination. The Security Council's central communication array activated automatically. Emergency alert. Multiple Union border outposts have gone silent. Distress signals detected from colony worlds Proxima II and Ta City Prime. Unknown hostiles reported at all locations. The classification debate abruptly ceased as a new hologram materialized in the center of the chamber, a visualization of a massive, ever-changing fleet of organic mechanical vessels swarming through Union space. The Void Collective had awakened. The Vexari battle cruiser Relentless Hunter shuddered as another energy pulse struck its forward shields. Commander Sathvex braced against his command chair, scales darkening with frustration as damage reports flooded the tactical display. Shields at 37%, reported Weapons Officer Krenvex, her talons dancing across the control interface with practiced precision. The collective vessels are adapting to our modulation frequencies faster than we can recalibrate. Through the main viewport, Sathvex watched with mounting dread as the Void Collective ships, nightmarish amalgamations of organic tissue and mechanical components, shifted their configurations in real time. Where the first engagement had begun with conventional Vexari battle tactics proving effective, the enemy had rapidly evolved countermeasures. Execute pattern Sigma 9, he ordered, falling back on centuries of established Vexari military doctrine. The battle formation had been refined over generations of conflict, its effectiveness proven against dozens of hostile species. The Vexari fleet moved with perfect synchronization, their ships sliding into the complex three-dimensional pattern designed to maximize firing solutions while minimizing exposed shield surfaces. For a moment, it seemed to work. Several collective vessels faltered under the concentrated barrage. Then, with horrifying speed, the enemy adapted once more. Their ships rearranged into a formation that precisely countered Sigma 9, exploiting the pattern's one vulnerability, a brief exposure during the transition between attack phases. 3 Vexari cruisers erupted in silent explosions before they could adjust course. Retreat to fallback position, Sathvex commanded, suppressing the instinct to continue fighting. The Vexari did not flee from battle, but neither did they throw lives away without purpose. Alert High Command that standard engagement protocols are ineffective. The enemy adapts too quickly. As the battered Vexari fleet regrouped at the Union defensive perimeter, reports from across 3 sectors painted a grim picture. 3 Union worlds had already fallen, their populations and resources absorbed into the ever-growing collective consciousness. The rigid command structure that had served the Vexari for generations was proving catastrophically ineffective against an enemy that evolved its tactics within minutes. Back at the Union capital, the Council convened an emergency session. Casualty reports scrolled endlessly across holographic displays as military strategists proposed and discarded increasingly desperate plans. The collective ships appear to function as a neural network, explained Science Director Laren Vex, highlighting sensor readings of the hostile fleet. Each vessel learns from encounters and instantaneously shares that knowledge with all others. Our standardized tactics become predictable after minimal exposure. High Commander Taros Vex, the most decorated warrior in Vexari history, surveyed the tactical displays with grim resignation. We must acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. Our traditional approach to warfare has become our greatest weakness. The enemy adapts to our methods because our methods never change. A hushed silence fell over the council chamber. Such an admission from the High Commander was unprecedented, a fundamental challenge to Vexari military philosophy that had remained unquestioned for centuries. In that tense moment, Captain Rice stepped forward from the observation area where the human delegation had been watching the proceedings. "Perhaps we can help," she offered, her voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. Several council members bristled at the interruption, but High Commander Terosvex raised a scared hand for silence. "Explain." "The Horizon Seeker isn't a warship," Rise admitted, "but we have experience with adaptive threats, and we think differently than you do." She gestured to the tactical displays. "Your ship's attack and formations refined over centuries. That's your strength and your vulnerability against this enemy. They can predict what you'll do because there's a logic to it. But humans," she smiled slightly, "we're much harder to predict." Sath Vex, nursing wounds from the failed engagement, studied the human captain with new interest. His tactical mind recognized the uncomfortable truth in her words. When another border world went silent, the Council made an unprecedented decision. The Horizon Seeker would join the next response fleet, with Captain Rice granted limited tactical authority to implement human combat strategies. As preparations began, Sath Vex approached Rice privately. "Your confidence is either admirable or foolish. Your single vessel cannot withstand direct collective fire." Her brown eyes met his vertical pupilled gaze steadily. "We don't plan to fight them conventionally," she said. "That's the point. Humans have been outmatched by stronger predators our entire evolutionary history. We didn't survive by being the strongest. Then how?" Her smile contained no humor, only grim determination. "By being the most creative killers on our planet." The observation deck of the Vexari flagship Invincible Claw hummed with tension as Captain Rice stood before the holographic battle simulator. Around her, Vexari commanders watched with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Sath Vex maintained a neutral posture, though his sensory spines betrayed his own doubts about this unprecedented arrangement. "Computer, run Simulation Alpha 3. Rise commanded, her voice steady despite being the only human in a room full of predators who towered over her. The hologram shifted to display a tactical scenario. Proxima Station under attack by Void Collective Forces. Standard Vexari battle doctrine called for a defensive perimeter established at optimal firing range, gradually constricting as enemy forces were systematically eliminated. Instead, the simulation showed human tactics. Smaller, faster ships deliberately appearing vulnerable, baiting collective vessels into pursuit through hazardous space phenomena. Asteroid fields, radiation belts, unstable gravity wells. The Vexari ships, instead of maintaining their elegant formations, operated independently or in minimal tactical units, their movements appearing random and chaotic. "This is madness," growled Commander Karasvex. "Your strategy sacrifices formation integrity and exposes vessels to unnecessary risk. Where is the honor in such deception?" Rice didn't flinch at the challenge. "With respect, Commander, we're not fighting for honor. We're fighting for survival." She gestured to the simulation results. "Your formations are beautiful, mathematically perfect, and that's exactly why they fail against the collective. They can calculate your next move, because there's a logic to it." She manipulated the controls, highlighting engagement statistics. "Our approach introduces randomness they can't predict. Every ship captain makes independent decisions based on immediate circumstances rather than predetermined patterns. By the time the collective adapts to one tactic, we've already switched to another." The room fell silent as the simulation concluded, showing a 70% reduction in projected casualties compared to previous engagements. High Admiral Terosvex, who had been observing silently from the back of the chamber, stepped forward. His scared face bore witness to centuries of combat experience, and his word carried absolute authority among the Vexari military. "I have lived 200 cycles," he began, voice resonating through the chamber. "I have fought in 17 major conflicts and bear the scars of 93 personal combat challenges. In all that time, I have never questioned our ways of warfare." He paused, gaze sweeping across his officers. "Until now." He turned to Reyes. "Captain, your methods violate every principle of Vexari combat doctrine. They lack elegance. They lack honor." His mandibles clicked in what humans might interpret as a smile. "And they might just save the Union. Implement your strategy immediately." Within hours, the combined fleet had restructured according to Reyes' adaptive meritocracy. Positions assigned based on demonstrated capabilities rather than species or rank. More revolutionary still, she introduced simulation-based training, where failure carried no consequences beyond learning. "In war games, we can afford to lose," she explained to skeptical Vexari officers. "In real battles, we cannot. Fail here, learn, and succeed when it matters." Sath Vex, assigned as her second-in-command, struggled with the concept. Vexari training emphasized perfection through repetition, not deliberate failure as a teaching tool. During a particularly intense simulation, where his team had been eliminated for the third consecutive time, his frustration boiled over. "You claim to be peaceful explorers," he challenged, looming over her with unintentional intimidation. "Yet you understand warfare with disturbing expertise. Your species is a contradiction that cannot be trusted." The command center fell silent, other officers bracing for human emotional volatility. Instead, Reyes calmly activated a historical database, displaying records from Earth, centuries of conflict that dwarfed anything in Vexari history. "We understand war because we nearly destroyed ourselves with it," she explained quietly. "Every weapon we've designed, every tactic we've developed, was first used against another human. We've stood at the edge of self-extinction more times than I can count." She brought up an image of Earth at night, city lights glowing across continents like stars against the darkness. "But we also built this. We survived because the same creativity that invents weapons also finds paths to peace when all seems lost. We adapt because the alternative is extinction." Sath Vex studied the image, seeing Earth's civilization with new understanding. "You evolved not just to survive your world," he realized, "but to survive yourselves." "Yes," she said simply. "That's why we fight differently. We've had more practice being both predator and prey than any species in the galaxy." Later, as Sath Vex returned to his quarters, he found himself reviewing human military history not as a threat assessment, but as a roadmap to survival. He discovered a species whose greatest strength wasn't physical but psychological, the ability to face annihilation and still imagine a future worth fighting for. The battle for Proxima Station would begin tomorrow. For the first time in his long career, Commander Sath Vex would fight not as a Vexari, but as a student of humanity. The bridge of the invincible claw fell silent as the tactical display updated. The Void Collective Fleet had emerged from hyperspace exactly where Captain Reyes had predicted, drawn to the apparent vulnerability in the Union defense grid around the Ta City colony. A vulnerability that had been meticulously engineered. "They've taken the bait," Reyes observed, her voice calm despite the enormous risk they were undertaking. "Their configuration suggests they're optimized for dealing with our last engagement pattern." Commander Sath Vex nodded, newfound respect evident in his posture. "The deception is working. They believe they understand our capabilities." On the massive holographic display dominating the command center, small markers represented Union vessels scattered throughout the system in seemingly random deployments, a chaotic arrangement that would have been deemed tactically unsound by any Vexari war college. But Sath Vex now understood the brilliance behind the apparent disorder. "All ships, commence Operation Antibody," Reyes commanded. The response was immediate. Smaller vessels suddenly accelerated toward the collective fleet from multiple vectors, their engines pushed beyond safety parameters. They weren't attacking. They were sacrificing themselves, deliberately allowing the collective to analyze and absorb their technology. "Those ships still have crews aboard," protested Junior Officer Menace Vex, horror evident in her voice. "We're feeding our own people to the enemy." "No," Sath Vex corrected quietly. "Watch." Moments before impact, the crews ejected in specialized escape pods designed to mask their life signs. The empty vessels, loaded with specific technological components Rice had selected, were absorbed into the collective biomass. "Every adaptation requires resource allocation," Rice explained, displaying models based on Earth diseases. "When a pathogen evolves to overcome one defense, it often sacrifices protection against others. We're forcing the collective to evolve in a direction we've chosen." The collective ships began to shift, incorporating the new technologies. Exactly as planned. Their configuration morphed to counter what they perceived as a new Union capability, dedicating significant resources to defense against a weapons system that didn't actually exist. "All capital ships, execute pattern Prometheus," Rise ordered. The main Union fleet emerged from hiding behind Ta City's moon, weapons configured to exploit the very vulnerability the collective had created in itself. The battle was fierce but decisive, the first clear victory against the seemingly unstoppable enemy. Hours later, Sath Vex found Rice alone in the strategy room, reviewing casualty reports. He had expected to find her emotional, perhaps compromised by the weight of lives lost under her command. Weaknesses the Vexori associated with softer species. Instead, he witnessed what humans called compartmentalization. Her grief temporarily set aside to maintain operational effectiveness. 27 ships lost, she noted without looking up. 115 personnel killed in action, despite the evacuation protocols. "Yet you saved thousands more," Sath Vex pointed out. "Without your strategy, the entire colony would have fallen. That doesn't bring back the dead." She finally looked up, her eyes clear but haunted. "Every name on this list had family, friends, hopes for the future. I need to remember that when I send others into harm's way." "How do you continue functioning with such emotional investment in individual lives?" he asked, genuinely puzzled by human psychology. "One breath at a time, one foot in front of the other." She gestured to the casualty list. "We honor them by ensuring their sacrifice matters." Meanwhile, on the Union capital, xenobiologist Trenvex presented her findings to the Security Council, a comprehensive analysis of Earth's evolutionary history that sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. "Humans aren't merely deathworlders," she explained, displaying geological data spanning billions of years. "They're extinction survivors. Earth has experienced 5 major extinction events before humans evolved, creating environmental pressures unlike any other known world." The holographic display showed successive cataclysms, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions that darkened skies for centuries, rapid climate shifts that eliminated 90% of all species in geological instants. "The Vexari evolved to dominate their world," she concluded. "Humans evolved to survive when their world repeatedly tried to kill them. Not through superior physical attributes, but through behavioral adaptation and technological innovation." As this revelation spread through Union leadership, the Void Collective launched a desperate attack against the capital itself. The tactical displays showed their largest concentration yet, a last gambit to eliminate the Union's command structure before the new human-inspired tactics could spread further. From the command deck of the Invincible Claw, now approaching the capital at emergency speed, Sath Vex and Rise watched the massive collective force converge. By all conventional analysis, the battle seemed hopeless, until Reyes smiled with unexpected confidence. "They've adapted to every tactic we've shown them," she observed, "which means they're perfectly vulnerable to what we haven't shown them yet." Sath Vex, now understanding human strategic thinking, completed the thought. "They've evolved exactly as we've guided them to. They've become specialized. And specialization," Rice finished, "is just extinction waiting to happen." The combined fleet approached the besieged Union capital, vastly outnumbered by the Void Collective armada that swarmed around the orbital defenses like dark predators circling wounded prey. From the command deck of the Invincible Claw, Sath Vex and Captain Rice studied the tactical displays with expressions that belied the desperate odds. "Conventional analysis gives us a 12% chance of victory," stated First Officer Karis Vex, her tone grim as she reviewed the sensor data. "Good thing we don't rely on conventional analysis anymore," Rice replied, her composure unshaken. She turned to address the assembled command crew, a mixture of Vexari, humans, and representatives from other Union species. "The collective has adapted to every tactic we've shown them. They've optimized their biology and technology to counter specific threats, and that's their weakness." She highlighted the unusual configuration of the enemy vessels. "Look at their current structure. They've devoted nearly 60% of their resources to defending against our last 3 attack strategies. They've become hyper-specialized." "And specialization," Sath Vex continued, now fully embracing the human perspective, "creates blind spots, vulnerabilities to threats they haven't yet encountered." The battle plan they unveiled was unlike anything in Union military history, a convergence of Vexari precision and human unpredictability. While the main fleet engaged the collective in patterns now familiar to the enemy, a smaller task force, led by the Horizon Seeker, would attempt something unprecedented. As the engagement began, the Void Collective responded exactly as predicted, their ships arranging into formations designed to counter the expected Union tactics. They didn't notice the seemingly insignificant vessels breaking away from the main battle, a classic human misdirection that exploited the enemy's focus on the largest threat. "They're still thinking like predators," Rise explained as her small force approached the rear of the collective formation, always focusing on the immediate danger. "But humans evolved as both predator and prey. We look for what's hiding in the shadows." What followed would be studied in Union war colleges for generations. The small task force deployed modified terraforming equipment, technology the collective had never encountered in combat, to introduce targeted gravitational distortions into the enemy's communal neural network. Not designed to destroy, but to isolate, to break the instantaneous communication that made the collective so adaptable. For the first time, the enemy could not evolve as a unified entity. Individual ships, cut off from the collective intelligence, fell back on pre-programmed responses that the main fleet systematically exploited. The battle was won, though not without cost. Several Union vessels, including the Horizon Seeker, sustained critical damage. The collective was driven back, their forces scattered across 3 sectors, wounded but not destroyed. 2 cycles later, as the Union capital began repairs, the Galactic Council convened to address humanity's place in their alliance. The debate was heated, with many counselors still wary of humanity's potential despite their crucial role in defeating the collective. "We acknowledge Earth's contribution," stated First Speaker Thelian, "and offer conditional membership with appropriate restrictions on human expansion and military development." Ambassador Reyes, now speaking officially for Earth, listened to the proposed terms with diplomatic patience. When the speaker finished, she rose to address the assembly. "Earth appreciates the Council's offer," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "But we didn't journey between stars to be anyone's protected species or controlled asset. We came seeking equals, partners who understand that diversity of thought and approach strengthens us all. If partnership means submission, we'll find our own path among the stars." The council erupted in debate until Admiral Taros Vex approached the central platform. The legendary warrior's presence commanded immediate silence. "I stand before you not just as a Vexari, but as a soldier who has witnessed the birth of a new era," he declared. "For generations, we believed ourselves unique, the only species forged in the crucible of a death world. We were wrong." He turned to face Rise with a gesture of profound respect. "The universe has produced 2 species capable of thriving where others merely survive. Apart, we are formidable. Together, We are unstoppable. From this moment was born the Deathworlder Accord, an alliance between Earth and Vex Prime that existed within, but independent from the Galactic Union. Other species initially feared this partnership until they witnessed its first achievements: medical advances that extended lifespans across the Union, terraforming technologies that made hostile worlds habitable, and defensive systems that protected vulnerable garden worlds from external threats. Years later, when a new danger emerged from beyond the galactic rim, it was the combined might of human ingenuity and Vexari strength that stood as the first and last line of defense. The Accord eventually became the most prestigious membership in the galaxy, though few species qualified for entry. Its founding principle, proposed jointly by Reyes and Sathvex, was inscribed in both human and Vexari languages at their shared embassy. True strength lies not in being unbreakable, but in how we remake ourselves from what would shatter others.